Welcome to another episode of The Dissection. This week, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced the National Dialogue, which will be a two-stage process. Step number one, a preparatory convention, which will be on Friday, the 15th of August, 2025. And then step number two, the National Dialogue, which will happen at the beginning of 2026. We now know what the price tag of that dialogue will be, and it's not a cheap price tag, heading towards 1 billion rands at 700 million rands. That's a very expensive Vula mlomo, if you ask me. And we know this because the announcement on cost of the dialogue was given in a press conference on Friday. And this is what was said.
We have received a draft budget from the preparatory task team. What we could say first is that democracy is not cheap. Building a nation is very costly. And that's why the next thing we're going to do, emerging from this work, we're going to go to the Inter-Ministerial Committee where we present the draft budget. Then we workshop that budget. And just to give you a sense, just to prove the provinces, the municipalities, you're looking probably estimation of more than 700 million. So that's quite a lot of money. So we just need to make sure that we deal with all those issues. But this includes the following. If you take the states SA in terms of reaching out to people through their processes of numeracy and doing counting in the country, those are some of the existing resources that the state has. So you might be tapping into those existing resources so that what you then call operational costs might be then taken into other existing programs of the state so that indeed no one is left behind. Using also what the Home Affairs has so you can reach out as many South Africans as possible. The other issue, of course, is the digital communication. That as well will be another method through the work that already exists, whether through GCIS, but also working with the media, as you heard in the statement that there is a communication work stream, and that communication work stream will pull together various existing initiatives.
Well, there you have it. Democracy is not guava juice at pre-taxi rank. It's not cheap. It's not cheap. It's not cheap. It's expensive, this thing. That's what the man said. And I think many people will ask, well, can we do this via Zoom? If the cost is going to be so high, can't we get MacG to do something via podcast? Can't we send WhatsApp messages? Can't we have this dialogue electronically and digitally? Why 700 million rands? Even if democracy is not cheap, can we defer this cost to another year? Can we think about it for a little bit? We're going to come back to the shop. You know how sometimes you go to a shop and then, they come to help you. You ask, how much is this shoe? And they tell you, then you're like, no, I'm coming back. I'm just going to look around the mall and then I'm going to circle back. 700 million is a lot. Can we come back? Can we spin the block on that money? So things are already moving. An interministerial committee has been established under the chairpersonship of the Deputy President to coordinate the government's contribution to this national dialogue. The Secretariat, which is going to be responsible for the day-to-day management, is going to be inside NEDLEC, which is the National Economic Development and Labour Council. Mr. Ramaphosa has already given his motivation for this particular national dialogue. He described it as an initiative that has been in discussion by a number of leaders in South Africa and many other people for some time now. By the way, that's classic Mr. Ramaphosa. It's a dialogue that has been in discussion for some time by a number of leaders, any number of leaders. He likes to say that, I don't know if you've noticed it, but anyway, let's continue. He said that the idea of holding a dialogue is not a new concept in South Africa, and in many ways, having dialogues is part of the DNA of South Africa. At every important moment in the history of South Africa, there has been a coming together of the nation to confront the challenges and to forge a path into the future in dialogue. Mr. Ramaphosa said the national dialogue will establish a shared vision of what it means to be a South African and develop a new national ethos and common value system. And it's an opportunity to forge a new social compact for the development of South Africa, a compact that will unite all South Africans with clear responsibilities for different stakeholders: government, business, labor, civil society, men, women, communities, and citizens. So here's some reflections on this announcement and some thoughts about this particular announcement of the national dialogue. Firstly, the cost of the process seems extremely high, 700 million. We just saw reports that about 460 public schools across South Africa are no longer offering mathematics as a subject, with provinces like KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Cape, Limpopo, Western Cape being affected. We saw that there are challenges with paying doctors, junior doctors. We saw that there are challenges as well with recruiting teachers to fill the teacher shortfall. So if that's the situation as things stand, would that 700 million not be better spent dealing with those particular known and identified challenges? The other issue that arises is the timing. The timing of this dialogue is essentially going to be in the middle of campaigning for local government elections, or very close to the campaigning for local government elections, because the local government elections are in 2026. So if there's going to be a dialogue which happens early next year in 2026, the reality is that there are going to be some who view it as a political campaign by the ANC and not a genuine dialogue. Because first, in the beginning of the year, you have the ANC having its annual celebrations, commemoration of its anniversary. Then you have the rush to State of the Nation, budget. There's a variety of things. So it's likely not going to be before the State of the Nation. It's not going to be in between the State of the Nation and the ANC's celebrations. That means that it's going to be likely be either in March or later on in the year, making it something that's very close to local government elections. There are going to be people who ask questions about that timing. There's also going to be questions around the timing of the dialogue in the presidency, in terms of President Cyril Ramaphosa in 2026 will be approaching the end of his certified presidency of South Africa, because once the ANC elective conference happens, anything can happen. You're not necessarily guaranteed to get to 2029, although you may, depending on who comes into power. If Patrice Motsepe, for example, wins the ANC conference, then President Ramaphosa can relax because, that's his brother-in-law. They're going to likely be in a continuity type of arrangement and he won't be removed. But after ANC conference, you can be removed. Thabo Mbeki had to step down shortly thereafter. Jacob Zuma had to step down shortly thereafter. So after conference is after conference. After school is after school. After conference is after conference. So having a dialogue in 2026, 2 years before, the end of his presidency, or 1 year before the ANC conference, is something that will be viewed as not having the kind of gravitas or impetus to execute on that agenda. If this national dialogue was happening in 2019, it would be a different story, because it would be early into the Ramaphosa administration. There'd be people who would view him as having the authority, the capacity, and the time to execute on whatever the outcomes of that dialogue are. But at this particular point, you have a dialogue in 2026, early in 2026, if the schedule is met. Then the report comes out maybe mid-2026. Then you've got 2027 to execute all of the agenda in 1 year. How is that likely going to happen, right? So those are issues around timing. And as you know, the presidency, or any presidency, late into your second term, you lose authority. You start entering what the Americans call a lame duck period of your administration. So there's questions that people are raising around the timing and whether or not this is just a legacy project at this particular point. Then there are also questions around necessity, because as things stand, the medium-term development plan has already been completed by cabinet, right? So there's a plan, and it's a 5-year plan. Already, the Treasury has a medium-term strategic outlook. The budget and the fiscal framework have already been released for the framework looks at the next 3 years. So at this point, the money has already been spoken for. The cabinet has already got a plan in place, right? Treasury has a direction. If you are having a national dialogue what is going to be the outcome of a dialogue where people come and speak, but already the government has decided and already things are moving? Business has already been having a national dialogue with the presidency. They set up a presidential project office. Operation Vula is fully underway. Business has contributed about 500 million rands to that project. So business has already spoken to the president. Already the cabinet is working on a particular thing. The public being asked to participate in this, what is the outcome for them at this particular point if already all of these decisions have been made? Then there are questions around the composition of the eminent persons who are supposed to be custodians of the process or to facilitate the process. So if you think about the composition is such that there's a lot of older people in that particular composition. The median age of South Africa is 29, right? So if you think about having experts who are older, having experts associated with President Ramaphosa, his rise to power, his duration of leadership. For instance, if you look at somebody like Bobby Godsell, who was the CEO of Anglo Gold and also the CEO of Optimum Coal Mine, when President Ramaphosa became chairperson of Optimum Coal Mine, he took over from Bobby Godsell. So they have a relationship, right? A long-standing relationship which dates back decades. He's a 72-year-old man. He's already been involved in various negotiations in the 80s, in the 90s, when he was in his 30s and 40s. So then you think, okay, why is he also being given platform now to negotiate again? Shouldn't they be a mix of people who are predominantly in their 30s, predominantly in their 20s? Maybe you have a lottery system where you say, we want nurses, doctors, engineers. We want people who are working as lawyers. We want people who are working in the civil service, in small business. We're going to just collect your data. We'll choose via lottery because maybe we can't have all of you speak, but maybe we'll pick 1,000 and then we'll have a conversation with those 1,000 and then produce something for the public. Wouldn't that be more effective? Because these are the people that are going to live in the future. Median age is 29, right? There are 38 million people under the age of 35. 38 million under the age of 35. Should the conversation not feature them in a much larger fashion? Yes, there are people like the Fees Must Fall leader Nompendulo Mkwacha, who's part of that process. Yes, there are people like Siya Kolisi who are part of that process. But shouldn't you have more people within the normal stream of public life, within the younger demographic, than having people like Bobby Godsell, who's 72 at this particular point, to participate in steering or curating the process, right? As things stand and as it looks, this seems to be a way of manufacturing consent and managing public opinion. In a way, it makes it seem as if there's an idea that let's get people talking in this national dialogue so that they feel like things are moving, so that they feel that something is happening, something is being done, or something will be done. So doing this curation of public opinion, this managing of consent, can be something that actually prevents the public from having organic conversations by themselves about how they are feeling and the solutions that they think will work. I want to give you a cautionary example. This manufacturing of outcomes has been done before. In the 80s and the 90s, big business started approaching the ANC in Lusaka in Zambia. They were talking with them. Brenthurst had a whole meeting. The Oppenheimers had a meeting with Mandela in the 90s, just after he got out. There was a lot of manufacturing of the economic outcomes that big business wanted, right? Anglo Gold, the Oppenheimers, the Rembrandt, the Ruperts, all of these companies, Anglo-Val, they were having conversations with the ANC to prevent what they thought would be a program which would be more socialist, more left-leaning, right? Some big companies were involved in this. And if you look at the economy, the same companies which were big during apartheid are the same big companies that exist on the JSE after apartheid. What do you think that is? Now, let me give you an example from the book ANC Billionaires, page 73. This is what the guy says on page 73. Right, let me position this thing properly. Spicer reiterated that everyone in big business was doing their bit to ensure that socialism and massive, uncosted, and unaffordable leftist programs never saw the light of day. We were working all the time to convince the ANC. We had workshops every weekend for years. We published books. Anglo was doing its bit, but so was everyone else. Balorand was doing its own thing. Goldfields had their own thing going. Every conglomerate or large company did what they had to do to meet, mingle, and talk to the ANC. And they were successful because the ideas that were coming out of the left-leaning organizations or left-leaning think tanks or thinkers within the ANC were not adopted. Instead, what you had was, what's the name? Tito Mboweni, Trevor Manuel, Thabo Mbeki pushing through and adopting GIA, right? Which was something that was actually drafted. The original conception of GIA came from the business foundation known as the South Africa Foundation. And you can read about this in the ANC Billionaires, and you read about the fight which happened in respect to that. So the economic direction that the ANC took in the 90s was a product of manufactured consent. It was a product of manufactured consent and a product of the manipulation of certain elite individuals in the ANC through a decades-long process of negotiation and relationship building by a big business, by the Oppenheimers, by the Ruperts, by the captains of industry during apartheid and post-apartheid. They kept their economic machine running almost uninterrupted. And they were the ones who spearheaded the idea of BEE that they now criticize. Such a hypocritical thing to think that, you're seeing these think tanks that are funded by the same people who spearheaded BEE, the same people who thought to prevent an organic redistribution model and a building of businesses within the townships that may exclude us. Let us actually reach out to some elites within the ANC and include them in what we've already built. Then now they come back and say, BEE, we don't want BEE, BEE ruined the economy. This is your thing. It's your thing. So just be aware. Just be aware that that's something that has happened and could happen. And I think is a concern that people need to be aware of, right? And there is a fair amount of skepticism about this national dialogue because this particular dialogue is happening after so many other dialogues. Let me give you some examples under the Ramaphosa administration. Job Summit of 2018. President Ramaphosa announced the Job Summit in his 2018 State of the Nation address, and the summit was held between the 4th and the 5th of October in 2018. Right? Unemployment right now has gone up. Right? Youth unemployment, 72%. Unemployment for people between the ages of 25 to 35 is at 50%. It's gone up since 2018. Job Summit. Then there were two presidential summits on gender-based violence and femicide. There was a summit in 2018 and there was a summit in 2022. And the summit in 2018 was following mass protests in August of 2018 after Uyinene was killed at the post office, if you remember that story. Ramaphosa announced the presidential summit on gender-based violence and femicide. Took place in October 2018. Second summit was convened in November of 2022 to review the process and uphold accountability. Right? Just recently, young lady was killed after going on a date or what she thought was a date. Right? So the problem of gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa has not been abated regardless of these particular summits that were held. And in fact, very little changes were made to policing and a variety of interventions that people asked for have not materialized. Then there was the Presidential Health Summit. One was held in 2018, another in 2023. The first Presidential Health Summit was held in October of 2018 under the theme of strengthening the South African health system towards an integrated and unified health system. A second Presidential Health Summit was convened in May of 2023 to assess progress and continue health system reforms. At least here, the National Health Insurance Act was signed, but a lot of progress hasn't been made outside of that signing of the National Health Insurance Act. Then you had the South Africa Investment Conference. This has been annual since 2018. Lots of money has been pledged, 1.2 trillion, right? over the next 5 years has been pledged. 2018, 2019, 2022, 2023, 2024, these investment summits. But if you were to ask the average person on the streets if they've seen trillions of investments materializing in their lives, they haven't. And then if you look at the reports, the GDP reports, they speak about gross fixed capital formation, which is a measure of how investments are being made by business in building factories and other forms of infrastructure for commerce. It's going down. So then the question is, where's all the money that was pledged? Then you remember Global Citizen. Do you remember Global Citizen? So many people, after they saw, or was it before they saw Beyonce and Jay-Z, they were like, nah, me, I'm giving you so much, so much, so much. Where's that money? Where did the money go? Because it's not looking like it's materialized. If you were to ask every like an ordinary person on the streets, have you seen that money? They haven't seen that money. Then there was the Social Sector Summit. There's been a lot of summits, in essence, a lot of summits. Then there's the NDP. In May of 2020, the National Planning Commission was established by President Jacob Zuma. The chairperson of that commission was none other than Trevor Manuel. The deputy chairperson of that commission was Cyril Ramaphosa. The NPC was tasked, the National Planning Commission, with drafting a vision and a comprehensive development plan for South Africa, independent of party politics and drawing on expertise from various sectors. The National Planning Commission's diagnostic report was released in June of 2011, and it analyzed South Africa's achievements and challenges since 1994. It identified key issues such as high unemployment, poor education quality, inadequate infrastructure, persistent spatial divides, unsustainable resource use, public health system weaknesses, poor public service delivery, high corruption levels, and a divided society. A lot of these problems are still the same problems in 2025. A lot of these problems are still the same problems in 2025, right? After extensive public consultation, after the release of the diagnostic report involving government, business, civil society, and labor, the National Development Plan was finalized and adopted by Cabinet in August of 2012. It's been 13 years. The targets of the NDP have been missed in a spectacular fashion in those years. For example, the economy was meant to grow at 5% a year. It did not grow at that rate, and in fact has been growing at 1% a year. And the last GDP data, which was published, showed a growth of 0.1%. So it's a far cry from the 5%. And because the target has been missed for so many years since 2012, I don't think there was ever a year, in fact, when the target was hit. So to actually grow the economy at the projected target of 5%, to catch up and to be able to hit that target, you need the economy to be growing at more than 8% if you shift the target to 2035. That's the reality. You can do that calculation if you want to see it, right? So the question then would arise, if we have an NDP report, if we've had so many summits, right? Jobs Summit, Gender-Based Violence Summit, Presidential Health Summit, South African Investment Conference, Presidential Social Sector Summit, NDP. If we have Stats South Africa releasing all of the reports that it releases annually and periodically, quarterly, do we need to spend 700 million, right, on Vula mlomo for more conversation when the other documents that have been compiled have not been acted on? Data from Stats SA showing issues with unemployment, inequality, education department diagnostic reports showing the averages that are not good for maths, for physical science. Stats SA, hundreds of reports. And by the way, even prior to the Ramaphosa presidency, summits have been called. This is not a new strategy, as the president indicated. There was a job summit in 1998. There was a growth and development summit in 2003. In 2006, there was an accelerated and shared growth initiative summit, which is ASGISA. And then in 2012, there was another social cohesion summit. How many summits do you need? Some would say you only need one summit in Hillbrow. I don't know if that's the only summit that you need. High Point in Hillbrow. I don't know what happens there. But some would say that's the only summit. The rest of the summits are not producing tangible value. They're not producing tangible value. Right? Think about this. In 2015, The South African think about this. Think about this. In 2015, the South African universities were shaken by protests. These protests were across the country. Wits was one of the universities where all of this blew up. I was there. Vuyani Pambo was there. Mcebo Dlamini was there. So many people were there. Right? On the ground, these protests became known as Fees Must Fall protests. Fees must fall. Jacob Zuma appointed the Commission of Inquiry into Higher Education and Training. And that commission, it was appointed on the 14th of January 2016. Next year will be the 10-year anniversary of the commission. This year is the 10-year anniversary of the protests, as in when they started. Right? I mention this to point out that while there has been extensive talking about fees must fall, and in fact a 700-page report was published, the barriers to accessing university are still as high as they were in 2015, 10 years ago. So, what was the point of the conversation and the commission and the report and everything else? The Zondo Commission released its report in June of 2022, after years of having these commission hearings and whatever events that were playing out that everyone was watching. Right? Think about 500 days of the actual commission, then days to compile the report, finally released in June of 2022. And 3 years later, there's been little to no progress in holding those who are powerful and implicated in the Hosh Karimaima behavior that was mentioned accountable. We learned so much about how some senior ANC politicians were getting bags of money from business people, calling them loans, etc., how they were living lavish lifestyles with that money. Some of them, we even heard on MacG that, they were always in nightclubs with the horse carries and conker. Do you remember there was once an interview where MacG asked Pulemabe that, hey, Zizi Kodwa is always there at Conker with the fresh young horse Karimamas. Why are you not there with yellow thighs that tell no lies? And then the other guys, me, I'm not interested in that. I'm not that type of a guy. Then I was like, hey, MacG wanted to tell us that he's seen these ministers in nightclubs, but he wanted to put it under the carpet, so to speak. Then I say, why are you not there like the other ones that are there? Horse carry behavior, the horse carry industrial complex. I keep telling you guys that this is a real... the problems can be simplified to horse carry behavior. The Zondo Commission cost over 1 billion, and the value that it produced is debatable. I think that's why there's some skepticism as to why spending another billion is the answer. I have a suggestion. If there is 700 million to a billion, why not give that money to Mkhwananzi? Give it to Mkhwananzi. So those who are watching from outside, General Nhlanhla Mkhwananzi is the KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Commissioner of the South African Police Service. We do have an audience from Australia. Salute to Australia. Is it Sydney? Is it Osborne? Wherever you're watching from in Australia, salute. We've got audiences in the UK. Are you watching from Birmingham? Are you watching from London? Tell us. We've got audiences in Kenya, Tanzania. We've even got audiences in the New Orania. The New Orania, the United States of America. America. Congratulations there. You were having your nice military parade with Trump on his birthday. I don't know what day it is for you guys there. What is the day? What is the significance of the 14th of June? I'm not sure anymore. But if you're watching from America, you're welcome. So the guy who is the commissioner of the provincial commissioner in KwaZulu-Natal, General Nhlanhla Mkhwananzi, is viewed as tough on crime. And what I'm submitting is that perhaps if he's given the 1 billion rands, the 700 million rands to increase the police force, that could have a material impact, right? Maybe you don't want to give it to teachers or doctors. Give it to Mkhwananzi. Tell Mkhwananzi, listen, get some detectives to deal with the Hosh Karimaima industrial complex. Then I think you would see corruption levels go down to zero. You don't think so? Give Mkhwananzi that money. I'm telling you, money is flowing in these nightclubs, Conker, Zanzu, or Live, whatever. Get Mkhwananzi on this case. These Hosh Curry fathers who are working so hard to sustain the Hosh Curry mimers through this tenderpreneurship. Give Mkhwananzi the money, he'll be the park station of Hosh Curry culture. 700 million. Mkhwananzi can stop this thing. Let him set up an anti-blesser unit. Or, if you will, the Hosh Curry Busters, HKB. Mkhwananzi, Hosh Curry Busters, HKB. HKB is coming to get you. Yeah, HKB, Hosh Curry Busters. I'm telling you, these tenderpreneurs will start panicking. These Hosh Curry fathers, corruption will go down to zero. You will see potholes disappear. I'm just kidding. I actually have concerns about too much policing because that can sometimes create its own negative outcomes. But that's a story for another day. I don't know what you think about Mkhwananzi, about the HKB as a suggestion. But I do want to ask you, do you think the national dialogue is going to solve anything? Or do you think it's part of a legacy project and legacy protection for President Ramaphosa? He's coming to the end of his term in office. Is this how he wants to close the chapter with a CODESA 3? Remember, part of his legend is that he is the great negotiator, the man who was able to facilitate CODESA, right? CODESA 1, CODESA 2. So a great negotiator, as the legend goes, is he looking for his last great negotiation to be the bookend of his story, his political story, and his political administration? What do you think? Do you think that's what it is? Do you support this price tag? Democracy ain't cheap. It ain't cheap, that thing. It ain't a quarter in your favorite kasi. It's democracy. It's expensive. What do you think? Let's have a conversation in the comments. I'll catch you there.